Hello? Hello, everybody. Just started this about a minute early just to work out a few of the kinks, make sure nothing's going nuts. And just double check to whomever's in the audience right now that they can hear me and everything. There's about a 10-second delay. I tried to combat it a little bit without sacrificing quality. So, yeah, let me know. Make sure you guys can hear me and everything. And yeah. Andrew. All right. Hello, everybody. Oh, that's a little loud on my end. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Guayana. I'm a producer, mixer, engineer from Toronto, Ontario. I've worked with bands like Silverstein, Limbs, who we're going to dive into here, Rarity, Like Pacific, Young Culture, and a bunch of other ones. Today, I am going to dive into a mix of a song called Stare by the band Limbs. They're on Unified, amazing label. And yeah, basically what I want to do in this is just sort of go through the process of how I mixed this song, talk about some fun little challenges I had along the way, some things I did to the song myself that sort of beefed up the production and mix. And yeah, a little bit about this song. It's a post-hardcore song, very gnarly, very big sounding. I love this band so much. This was produced by Tim McTagg from Under Oath, so I actually just mixed this song. I didn't produce it, but I thought this would be a good one to start with because they basically tracked it with Tim and everything, and Tim told me a bit about the back end of it and how his room's a little small. He had this one room mic that he tossed in. So I thought it would be fun, especially drum-wise and guitar-wise and everything, to go into the song and talk about how to take something that is basically, no extra flash, no huge room, no whatever, and make it sound like a super big production. One of the nice things about this song is all the guitar tracking was DI'd, and the mix is entirely amp sims. So I've printed them down here just as sort of in my workflow. It's something I do. I printed them all down just to make this sort of easier. I want to show you what I do when I do bass guitars because what was nice was I got to sort of treat this bass-wise as I normally would and just go through, work our way down the session basically and talk about all that fun stuff. And then, touch on the way I do automation at the end and everything like that. I don't know if you can really see it there, but, there's a lot of little fun stuff happening. Yeah, so I'm going to play a little bit of the song now from when it pretty much picks up, just so you guys can get a vibe of it, and then we'll sort of go through. One thing I want to talk about, or one thing I really want to do in this stream is incorporate, basically, I want to incorporate you guys asking questions about certain aspects and things like that. Either way, I'm going to basically talk about everything throughout the entire mix, so... but if there's anything very specific that you want to know, please don't hesitate to, toss in the comment section there. I'm keeping an eye on all that. All right, we'll take a quick little listen to a bit of this. What they forget will challenge. Yeah. Alrighty. So, So let's start with this. Craig, I will talk about that in a little bit just because I definitely do. And even though it's ever changing, I've sort of landed on a bit of an amp sim I'm digging these days. Um, do I load up anything on my mix bus before I start mixing? That's a good question to start with, actually. Let's start with that. My mix bus on this song, basically, my mix bus consists of the same 2 or 3 plugins. VMR set to a console. By the look of it, I did the Neve console on this one. Lately, these days, I'm doing the 4KE. It's a little wider and has this bit of like a, I don't know, like a nice little shine to it. And I don't know, just sounds kind of cool. This guy's almost always there as well, doing some sort of light sculpting right before my mix bus compressor. In this song, it looks like I was taking out a little bit of the 600 range, just a little bit by the look of it. What's a little bit in my mind? 1.3 dB. Okay, so maybe not a little bit. This is a bit of a broad EQ, but a lot of the times I'm boosting a bit of 12K and either a bit of 60 hertz or a bit of 100 hertz. Reason I'm doing that is just to sort of give that smiley, exciting sound. Going next is the FG Gray. This is, funny enough, not a setting I use anymore or a bus comp I use anymore. These days I'm using the Townhouse bus comp a lot, but every once in a while I go back to this bus comp because there's just something super magical about it, in my opinion. It's really nice to get everything nice and smooth. It just sounds great right away. It doesn't fight you. It doesn't sound unnatural or a plug-in. And yeah, normally I'm not doing these settings anymore. This was when I was on an auto kick. I feel like on auto you can get away with more compression, sounding a little less pumpy. Also a bit of a high pass filter. And then, so these two are the two I always start with. My mix starts with these 2 plugins. This set to nothing, like this set to 0, whatever console I've decided on. And then a bus comp, usually this or Townhouse. And then this guy will be on my bus inactive, set to these settings. Ooh, I put 15 IPS, usually set to 30 IPS. I guess when I was mixing this, I decided I wanted a bit grungier. My usual attack and release is usually around, it's tough to tell in this one, I can't remember exactly, but they're both fairly fast. I think 1, and then if I take this off auto, yeah, actually this is my normal setting, basically just this without auto, and usually taking off about 4 dB at a time at the loudest point. So yeah, my mixes always start with these 2 plugins or a version of this guy going on. Do you do anything with the VTM settings? No, I will sometimes clean up the noise reduction. Yeah, I lowered the noise reduction because we don't need this extra noise. But yeah, usually on VTM on my mix bus, it is 1/2 inch 2-track, usually 30 IPS, but like I said, this one was 15, which is probably a decision I made later on in the mix. And the FG9 tape. Basically, when you load it up, it's set for master or mix bus settings, and then I'll frig around with that. Normally, I'm not really hitting it super hard. It's a bit negligible in terms of why I use it, but as anybody who's used this plugin knows, it has a sound. It's very much that like slate tape sound. So I'm using it for that. Do I use a high FG Red or Townhouse? Yes, I do. I usually go around 60 to 100 hertz. I try not to do too much. I just don't want the absolute low end of the set of the song being completely annihilated. Yeah, so always starting with these 2, and then this guy inactive. Oops. Hello. Oh, okay. I think we're back. Oh, hang on. All right, there we are. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. No, sound didn't cut. I have this routed through Pro Tools. So Pro Tools crashed, which it likes to do. PT10 doesn't crash. I miss PT10. I don't though, because upgrading to another one really gave my old computer a pretty large lifespan once I switched to 64-bit. All right, give me a sec. Just gonna save this. Cool. So we're back. So we were talking about Mixbus. I'm not gonna open a VTM because he's scary. Yeah. So I want folders too. I just haven't installed it yet. I'm in no rush really. I like the idea of them though, which is nice. So yeah, just this guy's going on here, and it's only just taking care of, making sure kick drums aren't hitting super hard. Okay, so let's cross our fingers. Pro Tools doesn't crash. My audio goes out. Everybody's sad. You know how it is. I'm just going to check the quality of this quick. Nice. Excellent connection. Okay, let's work our way through. So I start every mix session basically drums at the top with any extra drum stuff, whether it's tambourines, bass drops, extra crash cymbals, everything like that, up at the up above the drums. Like little programmy drums will go there too, things like that. Next is my samples. I'll talk a little bit about those. Next is the session, then my verbs, my drum comp, and then I make my way down. All these get their own groups. So once all my drums are mixed, they go to a drum bus where I do some extra stuff going on. Once my bass is all mixed, goes to a bass bus, guitars, synth in this song, and then vocals. Pretty straightforward stuff. One thing I do differently than some people is I know some people set Pro Tools up like a console where they'll have, like 8 or 10 verbs and delays down the side, and and send everything to there, like returns. I don't like to do that. Only reason I don't like to do that is because I don't need to. In Pro Tools or any DAW we're in, we have the option to basically set up verbs per plugin or per section of the song, as long as our computers allow it. And I like that. So my drums get their own verb. When there's guitars, my guitars get their own verb, and then vocals usually get their own verbs. And this is pretty much what I'm always doing on vocals here. Short verb, a big verb, vocal delay, usually half, and a slap. And then those automate off and on throughout. Anyways, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, drums in this song were very fun. I think they sound awesome. I've gotten a lot of people tell me that they loved the drum sound on this, and they said that it was like very organic and everything, which I thought was awesome because it's mostly propped up by samples. But yeah, we'll take a quick little listen through, and then I'll talk about what I'm doing in here. Alrighty, so the drums were real on this song. They were recorded and then sent to me to mix. And so what I started off with, basically, I always start my mix getting drum sounds. I figure out sort of what's lacking, and I'll Oh, sorry about that, guys. I was talking for a bunch and you didn't even hear me. Yeah, I sort of like to work fast. I'm a big fan of minimalism. I try not to overdo plugins. If you look through the session, like, yeah, some of these vocals have some crazy things going on, but yeah, it's just one of those things I like to, take on a, per item basis. So drums, let's talk about this a little bit. So I always start mixing drums first. Usually start with overheads, getting a level I like. I'm gonna kill the Mutamatic here. Getting a level I like, just bit of cleanup I always do. And depending on the song, I will go in and compress the overheads a little bit. It really helps to hold the transient in place of like kicks and snares, and give them just a bit of excitement, especially when I'm lacking a lot of room mics. Just there to do a little bit of work. Funny enough, when I opened this session, I was just double checking everything, and I realized I had a lot of these Pro Qs set to linear phase, which incurs this really weird like low end rumble at the beginning that I wanted to avoid. So what I did was switch them all off of linear phase, adjusted their phases accordingly. This one had to be flipped. I think this snare also had it. And honestly, it sounded the same. So linear phases can be cool, but for the most part, it's not really necessary per se. Yeah. The drum sound on this, the raw drum sound without samples, and verbs. So I really liked the character of the snare on this. I thought it had a really cool sort of ring. And when I get sessions where I'm not super stoked on the actual tracking of things, I will still try to keep as much of the, power in it or essence that was tracked as possible. It's really important to me that, I'm not just like coming in and dropping all my samples in and going nuts. Toms on this sounded really good. So I kept the real toms, but I also put samples in. I stripped them pretty tight. It's a pretty common thing for me to do. But yeah, so let's talk about this. So when I started mixing it, I realized I wanted to use some samples. I made the decision pretty early on. I went through my samples. I grabbed what I liked that played really well with the song. And then, they are doing clearly a lot of the heavy lifting. I felt like I wanted a bigger snare room when I was working on this, so one thing I was doing was printing an extra snare room. Asher, do you fade the toms? I do. So depending on the session, depending on how much bleed actually happens, I will cut them fairly short. Lately these days, I've been getting a little bit of extra beef out of the overheads. Chances are when I was working on this session, I wasn't super stoked on how far I could get the real toms on their own. So I went in with some samples and some room samples and did that up. Snare sample doing most of the heavy lifting for your snare ambience. Yes, for the snare ambience, this guy and the snare verb are doing a lot of the work. I'll play you an example here. So here it is without or with all these samples. So the verbs on there are doing a lot for the snare drum here. Big thing in my mixes that I really like is trying to just get a big snare drum. And a big snare drum isn't always like the most exciting real snare. A lot of the excitement and bigness in a snare drum will come from the room. And when you don't have a room, sometimes your best, way to combat that is making a room. Like when you listen to these samples, I printed rooms on, I'm gonna kill this. Oh, I did. I printed rooms on everything just so they all blended well. Fun thing about doing it like that is you can pretty much just pick up whatever room you want per instrument and really tailor, like, ooh, I've got this kick room I really like. Cool, I'm going to use that kick room. I've got this snare room I really like. Cool, and so on. Is it just a far room mic sample? I'm not totally sure. I could probably check. Give me a sec. I'm going into my secret stash of samples. Oh, trigger 2. What was I doing? The dong. What a good snare. And then by the look of it, the majority of the room was this Modern and Massive recording snare sample. I guess it probably played really well with the whole kit. It was very like honky and exciting. Oh, and bottom snarey. I like bottom snare happening a lot in my room samples. It's like actually I think I pulled up the wrong one. It's super exciting to hear that bit of extra sizzle happening. Yeah, I did pull up the wrong one. So what am I doing? Yeah. Most of these rooms actually are Get Good Matt Halpern, I think, and I just blended them to taste and dropped them in and then treated them. Yeah, bottom snare. Bottom snare is something I very much ignored for a long time in my life, and I'm happy that I'm happy that I came around to it because it really adds a lot to the sound. All right, a couple things I really like to do on sessions is I love clipping stuff, whether it's with tape or whether it's with like a clipper. And I can see already that on the top snare sample, I'm using Massey Tape Head, which is probably my favorite tape plugin in existence. You set it to the middle, you drive it if you want, you trim it back, just, make it work in the right spot, and it sounds super good. It takes away some frequencies that you could obviously just EQ out, but it saves you a bit of that time and makes it more like intuitive to just toss that on and work with it. Yeah, so drums. I didn't keep a lot of the real kick. It's in there probably for a bit of the Jordan Valeria plugin. The real kick's in there a lot, or just for probably some consistency, but really, yeah. I mean, I probably left it in as a courtesy, but really I could have gone without that. There's a kick out happening, same thing, even lower. But yeah, I kept a bit of. It's really subtle, but you hear that extra beef drop in when the snare top is in. So I kept the real snare top, like I was saying earlier. It had a lot of cool vibe. Gated it typically with this gate, which I don't use much anymore since the Slate gate came out. This is really cool. It's a frequency dependent gate, so you find like the honk of the snare, and then you treat it like a gate after that. What did I do in VMR here? Ooh, I played with this guy. I never use this. I probably just got it and wanted to frig around on it, so I pulled it up. What am I doing compression on my kicks and snares? So almost all the time I'm using some sort of distressor on kicks and snares. I guess on this kick I was using a pretty hefty amount of this one. On the snare, probably doing the same thing. Funny enough, it's actually sort of negligible on this snare. And the reason being is I do a hefty amount of drum comp too. So the parallel comp is doing some heavy lifting on snare as well. And then, yeah, on the real snare, a lot of Arouser, which is another distressor plugin. 4-to-1 is almost always my go-to with these sorts of things. This, I was doing a bit of extra clipping. The beautiful thing about the Arouser is it's basically a 1-to-1 distressor with extra features. And one of those amazing extra features is the ability to clip it a little bit harder on the way in. And then by the look of it, I changed the detector side chain probably to help mitigate a bit of bleed being compressed. The beautiful thing about this, it's a bit of an advanced section here, but you can tailor the compressor to only activate when certain frequencies are happening. And I probably did a little bit of work to get rid of some of that. What else did I do? I started with a preset, so probably that's what happened. But I definitely changed these. These are almost always my go-to attack and releases. Medium attack, if not faster, and almost super stupidly fast release. I do all my compression with that sort of settings, and it's just something I'm really stoked on. Talk about the room a little bit on this one. I basically just used it as a bit of a character mic more than anything. A little whistly, but I kept it there just to sort of even out the stereo field a little bit, not be so, like, I like wide stuff obviously, but I'm not a fan of like super wide. So I probably just brought that into where I thought was nice and tasty and left it there. I probably just got rid of a bit of tons of annoying stuff happening. Getting rid of all the annoying stuff and then compressing the shit out of it. Just something I always do. I was playing around with the Monster. By the look of it, a lot of Slate plugins came out when I did this mix, because there's some on here I'm not using, but they're clearly like, get this plugin, and I gave it a try. Case in point, the API, which is known for being a drum thing, but I just wasn't a big fan of them in general. Plus, I'm a creature of habit. I mean, for me, these days, my whole thing is Pro Q3 and SSL plugins. Things I do on everything I want to talk about. Kicks, I'm almost always taking out the same grossness. It's somewhere around here. I'm probably doing it more in VMR. Yeah, I'm taking out a stupid amount of 3 or 4 in the kick, boosting where the like thud, or not the thud, the like attack of the kick drum is. And this was probably a little bit bright on the sample, so I backed it off around 11, 12K. Sweet on guitar. Yeah, I bet it does. I know that API EQs are super nice for guitar stuff. But the way I EQ my guitars, I almost never go for a load of extra stuff unless I'm like unless somebody sends me a track and I'm lacking something. Yeah, and then what I was saying about the kick is something I also do on toms a lot. These toms a good example to show. Yeah, because I didn't even EQ the samples. Almost the same thing on toms that I'm doing to a kick drum, at least as a like starting point per se, not the exact same thing. There's a section with toms. There's a bunch of toms happening. I'm always taking out a boatload of like 500 to 600. You don't need that at all in toms, in my opinion. You see a lot of guys do that. It's very much a reason to that. Finding the most exciting stick attack part. Rich. And then brightening them a little bit more with usually probably 8K. Yeah, good old 8K. And then on the floor, I wanted a bit more beef. Cranked up a bit of 240 on the floor. Bit of a weird frequency. Probably just played around until I found it. But like I said, eventually in this song, I ended up just lobbing samples in on the toms. Sample sounded really good as is, so I probably just I don't even think I EQ'd them when I dropped them in. So a big thing I like to do is I like to make the room sound as natural as possible when I don't have a room. And that is a tough thing. I'm still battling this today. One thing I love is this Slate Verb Suite plugin. Slate SSL or mainly the Waves. I'm back to the Waves one these days. There's just some stuff in it that's really nice. That the Slate one, I don't know. The Slate curves are strange, so I'm I'm on the Waves SSL train this day. I tried the BX one. It's cool. I like it a lot. It but back to me being a creature of habit, when I started with the Waves one, I just feel like it's the nicest. And I feel like its compressor is actually really good. Anyways, drum room is something I really want to talk about. Let's figure I'd play a little bit of it first. It's really important when you don't have room mics to make the illusion of a room. The way I go about doing this is with Slate's Verb Suite on I guess one of these presets, Realistic Full Drum Room, and then I probably tweaked it. I chose it because it's called a Realistic Full Drum Room, and it's exactly what I'm trying to do. One thing I do a lot is I only send my overheads to the drum room. I don't know why, but if overheads are tracked really well, and they were actually tracked super well in this session, they've got a pretty well-balanced view of the kit, and that's something I'd want in room mics is a balanced room version of that. So sending those to the drum reverb only is a big thing of mine, and then I probably just cleaned up some frequencies that were annoying me in the drum room. Yeah, a bit of dynamic EQ happening to really maintain the boring stuff. And then I'd just blend that into taste. I probably just wanted a little bit of it. It was important for everything to live in its own place. So between all these samples, the goal is to make it sound like they're living in a room together. This isn't maybe the best example because I do have this verb kind of quiet in this mix, but probably because I wanted I wanted the cymbals to be a little less crazy. And then snare verb is just R verb, probably on, Studio A, and then I roll off a bit of the EQ on that. I'll play that for you now. Adds a lot of beef to the snare. It's weird. People say that reverb is sort of like overuse of reverb is like sort of like an amateur thing to do, but I think the trick is to have that lush sound without anybody really noticing it's a lush sound. So with drums, my goal isn't reverb, it's room. If I'm adding a reverb, it's because I'm lacking something in the rooms. I'm not looking for an actual sort of like digital reverb sound at the end of the day. I'm looking for very much the way to make it a room sound. So yeah, in this song, one thing I like to do a lot in my productions and mixes is if I need a crash cymbal, instead of turning up the overheads in certain spots, sometimes I'll go find a crash that sounds kind of the same. This very dark sample is in there at points where I really wanted a bit of extra crash. Without it. So you're seeing it's doing a lot. You hear it pointed out when you're listening on your own. Like, when someone points it out to you like I'm doing. But really I found it blended super well. And when the chorus drops, what's your process balancing drums? Always start with the overheads. So I'll start with the overheads. I'll sort of take a listen to them. I'll see if they're lacking anything. And if they're lacking anything, I will pretty much compensate for that with EQ. I will go through, find the most annoying sort of frequency in everything and get rid of those. This, I guess I made this dynamic. Yeah, just so it must have been in the crash cymbal and it was really annoying sounding. So I got rid of it. And then another one that I felt could just be without. Remove a bit of low end, remove a bit of that. The overheads were tracked with, if I'm not mistaken, they were KM184s, which are very bright microphones and sort of scoopy to begin with. So I didn't like overdo any scoopiness or any like top end on these cymbals because I don't think I needed to. Any benefit to having cymbal samples in stereo? Yes. So this sample in particular is a double crash hit. So stereo makes sense for that because what you're hearing there is like a left and a right crash at the exact same time. And then my bass drop. Don't know where I got that sample. Actually, I might have made this one. I'm not totally sure. But it's my like go-to bass dropper. Yeah. So let me talk about my drum bus for a little bit here. So VMR's first on the chain. Always. I used to do VMR, the mix channel, wherever it is. Yeah, the VCC channel on every single track, and I stopped doing that. I didn't find it to be as like revelation-y as I expected, so I just, only started putting them on my buses. I still think a little bit of it is placebo-y, but at the end of the day, I'm really happy with how it sounds. And I find that just on the buses still do the trick. So my buses are always linked with that happening. Anyways, drum bus. I chose the Neve console. I was on a big Neve console kick for a long time. Lots of really exciting low end that gets added to the drum bust. Lots of really exciting low end gets added with the Neve console. That's not ridiculous sounding, and I do like the actual tone of Neve consoles. This is a go-to mix bus setting I'm using on drums all the time. Usually if I want a bit of top end, I'll crank that guy, but this guy lives around here, 3.2. This guy lives around 1.4, just to take out a little bit of craziness. And then if I want a bit of extra beef on top, I'm boosting like a little bit of 80 hertz, like just a little bit. It's just happening to accentuate the like low energy a bit. And this EQ is usually optional in my mixes. We'll see, because I'm going to do a few more of these. We'll see where it's always loaded. It's just not always on. And then a rouser. I love this plugin. You'll see it on every session I do multiple times. I love distressors, so to me it was just basically, it made sense when they released it that I would be able to use it everywhere in the mix. I'm gonna go to a busier part here. It's just there. It's just there to tame some peaks. Do you find your snares usually much louder than everything else or about equal to the kick? I find kicks actually the loudest. Every time I'm going back to a mix, I am always boosting the kick drum, finding it just gets lost super easily. Snares though, especially with mastering limiters, you can crank the piss out of a snare a little bit in a mix, and mastering will generally just make it really big and exciting sounding. It's so scary because you'll listen back to your mix and be like, geez, what is happening? But realistically, you can go nuts. So yeah, they're both usually the loudest things in my mix because they're the ones that'll get squashed the nicest by mastering. All right, drum bus. Pro Q3. I probably added this afterwards. Yeah, by the look of it, I did. Whoop. I was going through getting rid of a few frequencies I didn't like the sound of throughout the entire drum mix, and probably late in the game, I was like, oh, this is cool, but I'm still hearing these little things. So I went back and, just notched them out just a little bit, like about 2 dB at most. And Kramer tape. Kramer tape's a fun one. It's very aggressive sounding. It's very saturated. And in this mix especially, it's so bright without that Kramer tape on. I guess I wanted to kill the drums a little bit in terms of brightness. They were probably poking out in the mix a little bit, so I went in and I just tossed this guy on. I don't normally drive it this hard, but geez, it sounds good. Soothe is one of my all-time favorite plugins. Soothe 2 especially, the one that just came out. I use it a lot. I don't think I owned it at the time of doing this. Also, Soothe is one of those plugins that I won't use all the time just because I have it. I'll only use it if I need it. But when you use Soothe, it is friggin' fantastic. Are your drum verbs and drum auxes going to your drum bus? Yes. I was talking about that a little bit earlier. I guess I should have expanded. So anytime I make a reverb for a specific thing, it goes to that thing's bus. Reason is, like I was saying, we have the ability to just, make a bunch of reverbs for everything we want. So instead of treating it like a console, I'll have my drum verbs going with my drums. So whenever I'm soloing my drums, you get everything at once. I'll have my vocal verbs doing that, guitar verbs, etc. Oh, quick thing I'll touch on. Parallel compression. I like my parallel compression being fairly aggressive. I want it to add some transient to the drums, which I'm even doing a bit more with this attack mod knob. Then fatten everything as well. And then I just pepper that in. See, it's just there to lift the kick and snare mostly and just make it super exciting. All right, I'm gonna move on from drums. If anybody has any questions or anything about drums before I do that, I don't mind going back, but this would be like kind of a cool time if you wanted to know anything in particular about drums. If not, I'm gonna go on to bass. Do you send pre or post faded for parallel bus? I do both. In this session, I did pre-fader. And probably because I wanted a bit more of a finer control over how much snare and toms. Yeah, definitely toms. Toms go nuts on that. I wanted a bit more control over how much each item was being sent there. It's really the only reason I would do pre-fader. And track's not going to the parallel bus. In this mix, the real kick and snare aren't going to the parallel bus, and the triggered racks and floors aren't going to the parallel bus. Don't know why I decided to do that. Normally I would send toms. I guess while I was mixing, kind of sounded all right, and I just rolled with it. Usually in my mix, when I pull my template up, kicks, snares, toms, both samples and real are going to the parallel bus. I never send cymbals to the parallel bus. They just get a little too messy for me. I used to do it all the time when I was younger, but I don't really anymore. I'd rather find different ways to make the cymbals exciting. I find that sometimes the parallel I'll use on shells doesn't always work on overheads. And like I said, I'm a bit of a minimalist. I'd rather make the overhead sound how I want and just, groovy man, keep rolling with it kind of thing, instead of go back and try to send them to the parallel bus. Also lets me automate the parallel bus when I want more exciting things, and I don't get a lot of cymbal craziness happening when I do that. So, so I tend to just do shells to the parallel bus. Alrighty, bass guitar in this song. Bass guitar in this song is awesome. I just love bass guitar in general, but big fan of grindy bass guitar. So when I got this, I got a DI and an amp tone. This is the amp tone. Pretty good amp tone, actually. I just, back to being a creature of habit, went to a few things I like to do on bass. So on the bass DI, my favorite plugin for bass ever is this. It's free. You should go get this if you want bass tones that are awesome with almost no effort. TSC Audio BOD. Always crank the low knob on it. Normally I have a blend, but I probably didn't want to blend on this one, so I opted out of it. And then just, I play around with these on a per case basis, including the drive, but it's a very nice When the drive is backed off, it's just good bass tone. Almost always I'm taking off the gross top end of, you'll see this on guitars too, but it's extra huge on bass. Taking away this like clankiness that nobody cares about. And then compressing the hell out of it. Do you generally mix drums first and then move to bass? Yes, I do. I do drums first almost always in my sessions, and then I'll do bass. I'll pepper the bass in where I want it basically, and then go back to the drums and make some decisions based on hearing that extra low end now. If I want to remove something or if I want to keep rolling with it. And then on the bass amp, what was I doing? Just a bit more roll off of the annoying frequencies, and yeah, pinning it into place. I'll generally do a bit of a scoop depending on the type of bass. On P basses, I'll go a little more aggressive here. It sounds a bit like a jazz bass. Oh yeah, definitely jazz bass. So I kept the scoop less aggressive because jazz basses are already hella scooped. How does the BOD compare? I like the Sans amp pedal a lot. A friend of mine always had the Tech 21 Landmark 300 head, bassist in my band. And it's basically like a Sans amp with a power amp. It was like my favorite sounding thing on the planet. Like it was like exactly what I wanted out of bass tone, just Sans amp and power amp. I don't own a Sans amp plugin or a Sans amp pedal anymore. I used to use it a lot, but I mean, even the stock one that comes with Pro Tools, but this one sounds incredible. I don't know why, but it basically just, it works so well. It reacts exactly like I was showing a little bit before. I'm gonna turn it up a little bit too when I show it this time. Not by that way. What's the best way to do this? I'll just turn up the track. Like that to me is like primo. The Mark's Hutter 300. Yeah, that was the one. That to me is like a primo bass tone. I'm getting exactly out of that what I want. I can't believe that this plugin is free because I would have paid like $50 for it for sure. Don't tell them that. Do you bus the basses to their own aux or each track goes to the 2-bus? So yeah, so the basses, just like the drums, both of these will go to a bass bus. And on that bass bus, let's see, there it is. Good old trusty linked virtual mix bus. Probably a bit more. Ooh, I wanted more grind by the look of it. Yeah. Wanted a bit more grind out of that bass, so I went with that. And then I probably put VTM. I was on a kick where I would put a tape machine at the end of every single bus just to feel like it was all going to tape. But realistically, the Alex. But these days I stopped doing it. I'm not a big fan of the sound that virtual tape is imparting these days as much as I was back then. However, I will treat it as a tool. So if it's something I'm looking for, that's when I'll go reach for it. Back a little less so a year ago, but even a long time ago, like I was saying with the virtual console, I just would do it because it was the thing to do. But these days, I'll only reach for a plugin that I really want to improve something. I won't just, link a bunch of plugins because they've got a cool link feature or anything like that. So I probably enjoy the bass enough to keep it on here. Yeah, it's just doing a bit. At 15 IPS, it's killing a bit of top end. It's set to the tape machine, like a 16-track tape machine and things like that. So I'm probably just doing that to figure out, lower the noise reduction on that one too. Don't need noise in digital plugins. Do you ever mult out your bass? I used to mult out my bass. I would find that I'd get like phase issues sometimes that I wasn't super stoked on. But my version of multing out bass these days, especially when I get sessions that have a printed bass amp and I still drop in my DI, is sometimes I'll use the bass amp that's provided for me as a, excuse me. I'll use the bass amp provided for me as like an extra distortion. So I'll filter off all the low end on that and compress the hell out of it and then just sort of mix it in as like a distortion on top of my bass tone. But I'm never multing out low end on bass. If I'm ever having a problem with the low end, this session I didn't have a problem with it. I'll usually automate Pro Q around the problem with a dynamic EQ and just make sure that that sort of tames the frequencies that are going nuts. Do anything for checking phase on bass. Just listen. I have a sub in my rig, so I'll listen to just the sub sometimes, and I'll flip through back and forth and see what low end sounds more aggressive to me. If that's not solving the problem, I will zoom into the waveform and look for basically irregularities, or not irregularities, but like where the cross points are. I probably did that on this session. It's something I do so quick these days, I don't think about it. So there's a good chance that I probably aligned the amp to the DI before I started mixing. That's bass. Bass is pretty straightforward. In a lot of my sessions that I'll do of these, you'll see that this plugin is the go-to. I very rarely steer away from it. If I do, it's because I'm looking for something that doesn't sound like a Sans amp bass to me, and that rarely happens. CLA 76 lives. I track bass really aggressively with a real Hairball 1176. And my waveforms on bass look ridiculously sausagey. And then I'll still hit it with more CLA 76 afterwards. CLA 76 is hands down my favorite plugin. It's 1176s are awesome. They attack really well. They're super fun. And yeah, I'm just painting the bass with that. It's really subtle, but it's doing exactly what I want. Are you not big on the Slate preamp emulations? I think the Slate emulations actually sound amazing. The only reason, hang on one sec. Yeah, the only reason I don't use them is because I own 1073 preamps. I own, some sort of API style preamp, and if I want those sort of vibes, I'll go for that. If I'm mixing something that came to me and I want a bit more aggression and I want a certain preamp sound, I will go in and take care of that. But for the most part, not really. Sorry, I'm just gonna check something quick. Cool. I'm not really a big fan of the emulations only because I have what I need already. If I didn't, honestly, if I started from scratch tomorrow, I'd probably, Universal Audio with preamp emulations and things like that. But since I have all my gear these days, I don't really reach for an emulation unless I want something extra. My tracking settings are the same as my mixing settings for 1176s. So you're looking at it right here. Attack right at the middle, release as fast as possible. Sometimes on bass, I'll actually back that off a little bit to like there on the real ones. And then I play with the input and output. My blue Stripe 1176s are wired interestingly, and they feed in a lot, so they're super aggressive right off the bat. So these settings usually look, not like this. But this section of the compressor is almost always how I have my settings when I'm tracking bass guitar. I'll also track bass with tube preamp, like a Universal 610. I love how they sound, and they are perfect for bass guitar, getting a bit of extra tube grit. Do I still use the NS10s? Yes, NS10s are my only speakers in my setup. I hate myself, so I'll only use NS10s instead of something that sounds good. And yeah, no, I'm kidding. Honestly, they sound great. I do have my quarrels with them every once in a while. I get really frustrated, but then when I go home and listen to a mix I've done on my NS10s, I'm very happy I still use them because it translates incredibly well. Alrighty, let's move on to guitars. Guitars are fun. All the guitars in this song are amp sim. Two of them came printed for me already. That is these two, the main rhythms. I believe they were. Are you still using your sub, or do you? No, I still have my sub. It's really important in my rig. It's not loud. It's just there to sort of tickle in that low end when I want to check. But yeah, I can't mix without a sub. Sometimes I'll try to start a mix with, like, I'll when I'm deep into the mixing, I will roll back and not use my sub right away. Or like I'll kill it for a little bit and then I'll turn it back on and make sure that I haven't overloaded low end. But for the most part, it's almost always on. So I got these guitars. I think they were a UAD Marshall amp sim or maybe a Bogner. I went in and took care of some problems. That was a super annoying sound in there that I just wanted to get rid of. was a cool tone. It was really like bitey and exciting. I love those UAD amp sims. I think they sound great. And oh my god, I wasn't expecting that. I'm boosting 13 dB of top end on that guitar. Okay, so that's how the tone came in. I almost never make boosts like that. I probably just wasn't getting what I wanted out of the guitars and just went nuts. So I like bright guitar tones a lot. So while I was mixing, I realized I wasn't super stoked on just hearing those guitars in the mix. They're very grindy and exciting. But I was missing sort of what I really like, so I went in and added these little low gain taking out a bit of the muddiness in those, and then just typical like cab frequencies that are annoying. So with all the stuff happening, without, yeah, those guitars add a bunch. I really wanted that happening. Do you usually mix bass or guitars? I'll mix bass first, and then I'll bring guitars in. Guitars for me are, I don't find them a challenge. It's probably the only thing in mixing I don't find challenging are bass and guitars. So they get mixed pretty quick. Once I get my drum and bass balance rolling, I'll bring up the guitars. I'll do what I want to them, which I'll talk about right now quickly. Usually removing a bit of the annoying part. Actually, a little bit more than that normally. Oh, down to 7. I probably just wanted these as like a bit of extra vibe. That's why I went so far. I usually don't go that far. But yeah, I'll do guitars after bass, and I'll basically just have them sitting where I feel like super loud guitars are exciting. When I do a lot of mixing, I want to talk about this quick before I keep moving on. I love when I'm doing a lot of production, I love adding guitars. I love the idea of like big walls of guitars and things like that. So what I did in this song, I found 2 chunks of. Did you add in those guitars? No, I had these rhythm 2s here were just reprinted with the DI phase aligned and blended in. So they're not actually. I didn't play them or anything. They're actually from the DIs. But funny you mentioned that about playing guitars. I didn't play guitars on this song, but what I did was I went through and sort of chopped up different segments of the chorus and made another extra set of rhythm guitars. So instead of adding like a third amp sim and then just going nuts with it, I chopped them up so they sounded like they were played, fresh takes of the song. Yeah, and went in and basically made a set of second rhythm guitars happening. I think I did that on this song. It was either this song or the other song. Maybe this did come with these ones, but I'll almost always do that if I want extra guitars. I'll try to find if the choruses aren't flown in a song, and I don't think they were flown in this. I think they were all recorded. I'll grab basically an extra set of them and just like fly them around until I get what I want out of them. And then these were an amp sim of mine as well. Yeah, in mixing, I like to, I want to deliver a product that sounds like something I've done, especially when I feel like I'll always consult with the band. I'll never just go for it, but I'll always ask the band, like, hey, are you cool if, I want to add some tambourine in this chorus, or I want to, I really want these guitars boosted up. Do you mind if I, add in an octave layer or something like that? Something sort of fun just to get it rolling. This might be the original tone that was sent to me, and I probably just made it tinier sounding. Yeah, it was like a boxy little guy. Cleaned up the craziness. That amp sim must have a gnarly thing happening at 685. And then brighten the hell out of it. The lead tone, I'm pretty sure I left alone in this one, the one that was given me. Yeah, it had a cool vibe. I wanted to roll with that, so I left that. Been doing anything cool on the guitar bus? Oh, a little bit more cleanup. I go nuts with guitar cleanup. The frequencies drive me nuts. I try not to overdo it because sometimes you can kill guitar tone, but when there's stuff that just piles up, especially on the bus, that's when I'll go to the bus, grab, Pro Q on the guitar bus, do that. VTM as well. Ooh, VTM's hitting pretty hard, so probably what I'm doing with that is getting a bit of that tape vibe for these guitar tracks. There's some cleans happening in the bridge. I bus my rhythms and leads together. However, since the folders thing just came out for Pro Tools, I'm going to change how I do that in the future. I'm basically going to have them in folders and then to a main guitar bus at the end of the day. That folders feature is going to be incredible when it happens. I'm going to have a folder for rhythms, so all these will be in one folder. Leads will be in its own folder, its own lonely folder, and then cleans will be in their folder. Cleans on this, I think I left the tones the way they were. Yeah, added a bit of delay. Compressor just to bring it up in volume. It's probably not really doing a character-y compression. I guess it is on sort of the harder hits. And this clean alt, what did I do? I did something fun here, didn't I? I did. There's a bunch of cool synths in this song that are just sort of like noise happening. And what I wanted to do is sort of accentuate that. So on one of the alternate takes, actually, is it an alternate take or did I just duplicate it? I just duplicated it. I duplicated the clean. I tossed Alter Boy on it. Cranked the pitch formant. And the formant on this plugin's a little... it's a little wonky when you do it, and that just added to the cool vibe of those cleans. Without it. With it. Just a bit of space. It's like a very creepy, spacey time. Oh, want some brightness out of those. And I'll play that... I'll get to the synths now with these guitars because they're basically guitars in this song. They're not really like synthy synths. Yeah, this bridge just had a really creepy vibe. There's no vocals or anything in the bridge. I wanted to just make it very exciting sounding and everything. So, little tricks like that are really good ways. You just duplicate the guitar, Alter Boy the hell out of it, play around with the settings on it. You get yourself a little toy box. So yeah, guitars, I'm, again, fairly methodical. I'll go through, I'll remove the frequencies I want out of them that are bothering me. I'll roll off a bit of the annoying top end. This is a bad example. This one's a better example. And I won't go to a guitar boosting unless I'm missing something. Clearly in this song, I was missing the top end and I went, nuts on it. But this is a very non-normal move for me. I just did it because I guess I needed it in this circumstance. Synths in this song are very straightforward. They're just cool, gnarly pads. I don't know how they made that, but that is a dope synth, and I should find out because it's really creepy and cool. It sounds like this normally. Pretty close to what the end result sounded like. I probably went in. Oh, yeah. It was probably super low endy, so I killed all that. Tried to get a bit of brightness out of it. This guy's doing the heavy lifting. The decapitator is just annihilating it. And I think on different spots in the song, I automated one knob filter, the most useful plugin in the world. Oh, I want to know what synths, Jordan. And then in the bridge, I had this other crazy. Oh, it was this cool, like, one note, like, I don't know if it was like a fifth or like a bass happening. I won't lie, I didn't really know what to do with it at first. So I distorted it, which I always do. But I didn't want it down the middle. It was really annoying to me that it was down the middle. So I real ADT'd it. This is the best doubler plugin in my opinion. Probably just frigged around with it. It just went with the grungy vibe to like distort that big old pad. There was a third synth, I think, but it didn't add anything. That's the secret. Now the band knows. I don't know why I took it out, but I think it just wasn't really like vibing in my mind, and nobody said anything when I sent the mix. So it's a big part. It's a big part of that bridge. So it was important for me to make sure that that synth, as distorted and frigged up as it was, really lived in its own little spot. Comes back in. It's sort of a motif synth throughout the song, you can tell, so I wanted just to make sure it sounded good when it happened. I sent it to the guitar verb. I felt like it didn't need its own verb, and it was only 2 tracks of synth, so I sent it to this guitar verb, Valhalla Room, probably just dark drum room, and then I tweaked it a little bit. Anything that sounds like a real room to me, and then probably cleaned up. Yeah, typical cleanup stuff I would do. Yeah, I have this just peppered in just to widen the guitars. Normally I don't send rhythms to it. By the look of it, I sent all the rhythms in these songs. That's a terrible sound. If the That Sick Dude guy makes a channel, he should just watch stuff and like listen to stuff and just go, "Ah, that's so sick." I am excited to talk about vocals. Before I talk about vocals, does anybody want to know anything else? Oh. Yeah, I know. I went past an hour. I was trying to keep it under an hour, but hey, I have fun talking about stuff. Bass? Oh, I talked about bass. It's gnarly. Basically, all you need to know about bass is this one. Yeah, that one. That's all you need to know ever. Coaxet Extra Special Amp Sim. Oh, on the guitars? It is 100% STL tonality. I probably got it at the time and was really stoked on it. Make active. Let's see. What was I doing? Yeah. STL tonality, Howard Benson, peppered in. Always, always, always cab 2. Don't use another cab in this stupid program. And then the big, cab 2. And then the and then the extra rhythms were this red amp, again, cab 2. Oh, cab 3, I lied. And yeah. And I would say look at these settings, but honestly, this amp sim's pretty easy to use, especially when you're on cab 2. Just choose an amp and kind of like go nuts with it. I did some cleanup. Oh yeah, but these are the same. Yeah, because I printed it from here. Ignore these CLA 76s. I probably just use them to boost up the volume. I would teach you about them, but they're useless. Alrighty. Yeah, STL tonality is awesome. It's probably one of the best amp sims I use for just big, loud guitars. Tone Hub that they just released is insane. It's super good. It's all their Kemper packs in like a plugin, basically. Oh, Craig, no problem, man. I'm happy you enjoyed. All this will be up on my, like, it'll stay up on my YouTube and be up on Instagram, IGTV afterwards. So if you miss anything, or if, don't worry too much, you'll be able to catch it all. I don't remember if I dialed the tones after mixing drums. I probably dialed in the tones when I started working on the guitars, because I was like, oh, these are lacking. EQ's not doing the trick. What can I do? So I started just beefing up the guitars as need be, basically. The only time I probably added these guitars was when I was adding in these extra ones, picking a tone for that. I probably picked closer to, or later on in the mix, just to sort of see what would mesh well with this when I got to the chorus. All right, vocals. Screaming vocals, I love recording them. I love mixing them. They're very fun. They're always exciting. What they forget will kill us! Big thing I do on screaming vocals, especially when I'm given tracks, is I'll clean them up first with an EQ like this. Anything graph, just to sort of get the... What they forget will kill us! I could see a bit of rumbling happening sort of low. I wanted to take care of that. I went in and took care of that when it was happening. You said yourself if you abandon them! I love distorting scream vocals, so this guy's just on there. You said... Yes, SM7B into a distressor is like the go-to. When I'm tracking vocals, I'll do SM7B into a distressor because the 7B's got kind of a bad noise floor and the distressor's pretty clean. But if I'm tracking with another microphone, when the only other microphone I'll track a vocal with is like a U87, I'll go into Blue Stripe Hairball Audio 1176 clone, just because I can handle, or it can handle the extra noise with the mic like that. You said yourself if you abandon them! Yeah, I wanted the vocals to be distorted, and it's a distortion that you don't hear in the mix, but you would know it was gone if it wasn't there. You said yourself if you abandon them! So these probably weren't tracked with compression on the way in, and I want to, because I track with compression on the way in, I wanted to treat it like that. So I would EQ it how I'd EQ it on the way in. Decapitator, I wouldn't normally do something like that on the way in. However, on scream vocals, I probably would use a pretty aggressive compression that would have a bit of saturation happening. But I pinned it with a distressor. Or I didn't really pin it. I leveled it out with the distressor. You said yourself if you abandon them! You are the nailing! So it sort of before I actually mix it, it sounds like a vocal that I would have tracked. And then I'll go pretty. Yeah, actually, it's funny. I didn't expect that I used Decapitator first or second on this until I reopened the session and was like, huh. So it must have just been something I decided on kind of early on and just rolled with it. But yeah, normally I'd put something like that last in the chain. You said yourself if you abandon them. Cascading the compressors is nice because then you don't have to go so hard on the last one. Here's a blue stripe again, favorite plugin. Being hit pretty hard at 4-1. Sometimes I'll go like all in. You said yourself if you abandon them. It's really exciting on screams. I'm surprised I didn't do it, but I probably got a lot of what I wanted from all buttons from doing the Decapitator first and the extra distressor. And then the L1 limiter, little trick I learned from Jordan Valeriat about clipping just, like the tops. You said yourself if you abandon them. You are the nail in my chest and it's cave. Oh, screen fuzzy? Oh, it says I got a good connection. My internet, the studio's kind of bad, so I apologize in advance. I'm actually trying to sort this out so I've got better internet when I'm doing these in the future. But yeah, L1's just doing the classic little trim off the extra peaks. You said yourself if you abandon them. You are the nail in my chest and it's caving in. You said yourself if you abandon. I'm a fan of fast verbs when it comes to screaming, so there's this quick little verb happening. You said yourself if you abandon them. You are the nail in my. It's just in there just to put him into a room, and then a slap, which is classic. You said yourself if you abandon them. You are the nail. It gives the vocals a bit of room, which is really nice. You said yourself if you abandon them. Not particular. I don't approach compression too differently. Singing versus screaming, unless it's a very delicate singer, then obviously I'll do a lot more automation on vocals. I'll do a lot more just, delicate passes through to make sure everything's nice and smooth. But most of the time, yeah, I'm tracking a vocalist 4-1, taking off anywhere from 8 to 15 dB of compression on a vocal on the way in, like before I even do that. And then I'll do, almost the same amount with a plugin afterwards. Basically on anybody that's aggressive or anybody that's just a loud singer, it's just sort of my go-to move. Yeah, it's I like that really up in your face vocal sound in a lot of my work, so it's sort of how I do that. How long does this mix take? It probably took me about I would say it took me under 6 hours, including prep. So that was like, going through the drums, cleaning up all that stuff, printing all those extra guitar tones, doing whatever little edits, flying some things around. But the actual mixing of the song probably took anywhere from 2 to 4 hours to do. So I want to touch on the singing in this. So I got just basically 2 doubles of the chorus. What they forget will surely kill us all. And what I really wanted to do with that was make it as big as possible when this chorus hit. So what was happening here is we've got this extra verb that's really long happening. What they forget will surely kill us all. And on top of that, a big half note delay. What they forget will surely kill us all. And on one of the doubles, what I did was slammed it even harder. With this plugin's amazing for screams. It's actually amazing for a lot of stuff. I use gain reduction on a stupid amount of stuff. It's such a great little plugin. It does have a lot of its own little issues, so I cleaned up whatever it caused. I fake doubled it. and wanted even more gnarliness happening. So I loaded up CLA vocals just on the double.
What they forget will surely kill us all.
Me even more verb on that big vocal, an extra slap, and some stereo spreadage.
What they forget will surely kill us all. It's like we're all just waiting for the end.
When it comes to me producing vocals, I sort of flip-flop a lot. I will do, at the very least, in a chorus, there's a double happening, so main and a double. If I want it really wide, sometimes I'll just treat that double a little bit differently than the main. Sometimes I'll add real ADT if I decided later and I only track the one. But because of that, what I just said there, where I only tracked, say, a single double, I'll now track stereo doubles for choruses because I can always go down to a single double if I want, but I have the ability to have it nice and big and wide if I also want. So it's always nice to track all three: main, left double, right double. And then if you want just the mono double vibe, you just get rid of one, then having to make it afterwards. But if you forget, real ADT, where is it? Two driven vocals, okay. Two guitars are better than one, and then turn down the drive, and it is a scary sounding, convincing double. Little back vocals, I always love doing little things with. A little darker, a little more distorted, and then just tucked in. Different screamers need some different stuff, so I probably did a little bit different to Josh, the old bassist who was screaming. Yeah, he's hitting the decapitator a little more, and because I think he was tracked, pretty aggressively on the way in. I didn't do that little chain of VMR and things like that beforehand. I just did what I'd normally do. Cleaned up his stuff. Take off the hair on the top end. Totally unrelated. What is your least favorite thing to track? I don't know. I like everything pretty much equally, and I hate everything pretty much equally. I'm never stoked if a dude is like not competent at their instrument, and that happens along every instrument at some point somewhere. So it's not like I hate anything. I sometimes hate tracking bass guitar because I just want people to play it exactly how I want them to play it. But when I get a really good bassist, same thing. It goes back to that kind of thing where a good bassist will rock it and I'll be fine. So yeah, I don't particularly hate tracking anything. I kind of hate tracking clean guitars because I struggle with clean tones a little bit, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really make a big difference. But yeah, no, I don't really hate tracking anything as much as, as long as you know how to play your thing, I'm pretty happy. Choruses are the same in the song. Let's talk about this breakdown here. I automated the pan so the extra screams would get out of the way of the mains here. And then in the ending, there was this cool little alternate line. The low that looked like it wasn't being hit as hard, so probably treated it a little bit differently as well. Yeah, I totally did. What I really wanted was this song's chorus happens twice, and then it had a really it basically had the chorus happening again with a couple different chord changes happening, and I really missed the chorus, but I clearly didn't want to step on the original production of the song by just shoehorning in this chorus. So I added the chorus vocal in the outro and treated it differently. So you get that vibe of this third chorus, but it's actually got this outro third chorus vibe instead. was really important to bring that motif back of that chorus. And I did some fun things to this. So there's no harmonies or anything in this song, which I don't mind. Not every song sort of needs it. But in this outro, I took the 2 takes that are, the chorus and the chorus double, panned them a little bit, and I alter boyed them with, I think, a 5th. That's just happening the whole time. So the harmony isn't always great sounding, but it adds this super eeriness. You can't even hear it in the mix, and I was kind of bummed, although not bummed because some words it doesn't work super well.
What they forget will surely kill us all. It's like we're all just waiting for the end.
It's super weird. I don't even know why I did it. I was probably just playing around. But it goes with that like creepy synth vibe. It goes with that like everything just being distorted and gnarly throughout the whole thing. And it gives us a bit of a wrap up of the song, having that chorus just sort of tucked in there. On the vocal bus, what am I doing? I am doing some overall... Oh, see you, David. Thanks for coming to check it out. Some overall... I'm usually de-essing with this guy on a bus when I do it all, and then Kramer tape is probably hitting pretty hard. Screaming, I love saturation on screaming, so I just love slamming it, and that was like a good opportunity to do that. When it comes to tuning vocals, I will tune pretty tight. I will vocal line really tight. You can see up here, vocal line's like the go-to plugin for me. I will obviously make sure that transitions and certain parts of the word don't sound fake and don't sound overly straight. So I'm tuning with Melodyne usually to take care of that. And it's just because I want to eliminate any sort of mistakes. Like sometimes our ears are down for them. Sometimes in certain genres they're not. But I don't always find that people complain about overtuning as much as they used to these days. So I'll generally go really tight to a vocal line doubles. Yes, I vocal line pretty much everything that needs to be vocal lined. In this, I didn't. I probably left these takes. Yeah, by the look of it, I didn't vocal line them. I probably left these takes as is just because they were tight enough and they could be a little bit loose. But when I'm tracking stuff, I'll vocal line anything that needs vocal lining, basically. So yeah, vocals fairly straightforward. This isn't the best example in terms of like a large range of vocal stuff to show, but I'm definitely going to be showing some more stuff down the line. But yeah, these are sort of all my go-tos. Vintage verb on this setting. I don't know if everybody can see it, but that's my like my go-to quick little reverb. This high cut changes from time to time depending on the song. Big CLA plate setting. The Manny American delay is amazing because you can verb it and distort it and double it in the delay, and it lets it sit, being super lush and gnarly without it being in the way. And then just Echo Boy for some fake tape slap. I changed the times of these a little bit, just so they still slap up nicely. I changed it to cheap tape just so it sounds kind of gross, and then take off a bit of the annoying frequencies. Desert Island plugins. My Desert Island plugins, 2 of them. I could do an entire record. There's like fun plugins that everybody needs, but say the best way to do this is say you gave me like a stock thing. So I've got stock EQs, I've got a stock verb, stock delays, blah, blah, blah. My Desert Island plugins are the Arouser, the Empirical Labs Arouser, and FabFilter Pro Q3. I don't need another compressor. I don't need another EQ. I can do everything I need to do with those 2 things. Do you generally write the harmonies? Do they come naturally, or do you write them on piano roll? I almost always write harmonies. Like a lot of times when bands come with demos, it's just like a main vocal. I'll almost always write harmonies. And if there are harmonies in there already, awesome. I'll roll with them. What I'll do is I like writing sort of fun harmonies. So some spots will have extra fifths or like a second that rolls through in the last chorus tucked just to give you a bit of feel. The next song I do actually is going to have a lot of harmony and a lot of cool vocal production in it, and I'll talk a bit more about that. I'm going to be doing that on Thursday. Yeah, I'll basically write all the harmonies. If the song doesn't have any. And most of them are just, like the typical things. I used to overwrite harmonies a lot, and these days what I'm doing is only putting harmonies in when I feel they're really needed. However, last choruses, that gets thrown out, and I'm almost always doing like a boatload of ridiculous harmonies in last choruses. All right, I want to touch on automation just a little bit. The way I work, all of these buses afterwards get sent to a mix bus, which I talked about the mix bus a bit at the beginning of this. And then my mix bus gets sent automatically to I'll turn this on, automatically to two different audio tracks. And on these audio tracks are print and master. And on the print track is Pro L2 set to, this changes. It's just there for the end user, basically. What this allows me to do is print two versions at once of the song. And then I can export this one out to the band. And if the band is like, hey, that's cool, we're good, I will send this one to mastering. The reason I do this is just so the band doesn't have to turn up everything. This limiting I'm doing is never aggressive. It's literally just turning up the volume. So I try not to over limit because I don't want to totally destroy the snares, but also, a competent mastering engineer is going to do a better job at mastering than I will. So if you hear this with a little bit of crushed snares and you're signing off on it, know that, the guy who's actually mastering it, which I think Rogue Planet Mastering did this one, and he always kills it. Mike is the best. He'll do a better job. He'll make it louder. He'll make it brighter. So if you sign this off on this one, you'll be fine with this one, and this one is the one that goes to mastering. I do this just so I can print both at once. I can listen live, make sure I catch any last minute things that I want to maybe change. And it just makes it easier for me. So my template always has these two muted, set up, ready to go. Makes it easy for me to A/B between them, and just keeps my session nice and clean. I will self-master if a project calls for it, or if the budget's not there to go somewhere else. I don't always enjoy mastering, especially when I'm mixing a project. I like to separate myself from that ability. So, I'll only self-master if I really need to. If it's a single, I like mastering because I'm not deep into a song to the point where, or deep into a record to the point where I don't want to hear it anymore by the time mastering comes around. So if it's one or two songs, I'm down. But if it's usually a record, I try to always push going to somebody else, just because sometimes, I'm so attached to a mix. I don't mind the extra perspective. And mastering guys who are dedicated mastering guys are really good at their job. And I appreciate that. So the way I mix is I go through the song, and I'll do these little cuts, these little boosts at certain spots. So like the loudest point is always sort of 0. I try not to go over that for the drum track. But I'll build dynamic throughout the song by just cutting like a dB here, a dB. It's almost not heard. I'll do a little bit more fine automation sometimes too. Like I wanted that little pinch to drop down a little bit, so this sort of tapers down before it hits back hard. Or that big hit right before. The interesting thing about doing it like this too is it's actually feeding into my master bus or my mix bus chain. So this compressor is being hit less on quiet spots. That's bad. Where's the I feel like this adds a bit of an excitement to the mix. It lets you sort of listen to the song, or like, you get sort of into the groove of the pressure that the song puts forward when it's quieter spots. And then when the chorus hits, everything squeezes and glues a little bit more. And the most important part of the song is very in your face and very ready to go. Yeah, so that's an important thing. I'll usually group these together. I don't have a method to this. I'll always group like drum and bass just so they sort of sync up together for the most part. But when I'm going through the final mix and doing different automation throughout it, these will become unlinked, and I'll go through and boost what I want to boost, cut what I want to cut. Listen through and see, okay, these vocals were too loud. So after I pan them, I also, lowered them a little bit when they happened, or I wanted this chorus louder here. Beginning of the song, I want a little quieter, so when that all hit it.
What they forget will kill us.
First half of this verse lead. And just like small moves. I'm never making really huge things. It's a dB there. Enough that you feel it. I boosted the drum verb up in the bridge and things like that. Turn down one of the pads in the bridge and things like that. So yeah, and then I'll always do like a fade out by hand, or actually I didn't do this one by hand, but I'll always like not just a straight line. I find these sorts of curves are a little more natural sounding. And yeah, and then I'll go through and print the song based on all those changes. I think this one went through a couple revisions, but yeah. So that's this song. This is Stare by Limbs, and that was sort of a mixed breakdown of the entire thing. I found that master bus compressor, especially the Slate one, really does glue it together. So this is sort of the start of a little series I want to do, where I'm going through different songs. I'm going to try to do it every Tuesday and Thursday, and I've got a couple special ones planned down the line. This Thursday, I'm planning on doing. I got to double check with the band before I say what song it is, but I'm planning on doing a very vocal-driven pop punk pop song a little bit more on Thursday that I was really happy with the mix of. You'll see a lot of these similar things used, as well as other techniques. And yeah, this is before I sign off here. Does anybody have any other questions? And then, while you guys think of those, I will say, oh, dude, no, I'm doing this totally for people to ask questions. That's why I wanted to do it interactive instead of just filming one of these and uploading them. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so you can find out more when I'm doing these. I'll also be uploading these to Instagram TV. And Jordan, thank you. You're beautiful as well. I'll be uploading these to YouTube, Instagram TV. I'll be linking them on Facebook. I'm trying to figure out how to basically stream across a couple things at once, but it's not always the most intuitive thing. And yeah, so make sure to subscribe, make sure to check it out. And definitely check out Limbs. They are probably one of my favorite heavy bands in the scene right now. And I cannot wait for them to do some more music, because their stuff is so heavy, so gnarly, and sounds so good. Thanks so much, guys. And let's hang out again.